few months. I'm one of the philanthropy officers. And the first thing I want to do is thank you all for being here, because let's face it, you could be still sleeping in bed, you could be having brunch at Pedals Cafe, you could be on a hike, but you decided to come here and learn about an organization that some of you may not have heard before, called ProCon.org. So I want to congratulate you and thank you all for being here. There's a great expression, I use it a lot in my life, that says the map is not the territory. And what that means is we can talk about LA, we can study charts, we can look at maps, but until you're here and you go down to Santa Monica Pier and you smell the ocean breeze, or you look at the magnolia trees, you don't really know what it means to be in LA. And the same thing is true about creating change. And it's one thing to talk about it and complain about it and argue about it, but until you're ready to take action, it's a very different experience. And each and every one of you here has shown that you're people of action. So I want to commend you and thank you for that. So one thing I was thinking is that the quality of our lives is determined by the questions we ask ourselves. Would you agree? And have any of you ever wondered what's going on with the news in today's world? Do you ever think the news might be a little biased, maybe? Do you ever feel frustrated trying to get the facts? How about dinner conversations? Maybe a little strained over Thanksgiving dinner? Maybe just a little. Aunt Ethel, you're not allowed to talk about that. I know in my own family, we have family members, my brother and I have to call and say, please, you're not allowed to discuss this. Please. So anyway, these are the kind of questions that keep the staff at ProCon.org awake at night and working effortlessly and tirelessly to create actual solutions to just these kind of issues. And it's what prompted the founder, Steve Markoff, whose beautiful home we're here in today, to create ProCon as a solution to just this dilemma. And I hope none of you stepped on any of the chickens outside coming in. I had to dance around a little something. Anyway, but we made it. And before I introduce our three amazing speakers, each one leaders in their own right, I'd like to read a brief piece, some words that Steve sent, because he's very sorry he couldn't be here today, but he did want to have a few words read. So this is from Steve. Thank you for coming to our home today to learn and talk about ProCon.org. My wife, Yadwiga, and I are out of town on personal matters, and we're so sorry we could not be here in person to attend. As you may know, Yadwiga and I have believed for many years in facilitating people to think critically about issues. My personal view, and that of many others dealing with the mind and our thought processes, believe that it's one of the best ways to prompt people to think is by confusing them. Very sweet. For example, most of us travel the same street routes going to or coming home to or from work. We probably don't think much about the routes we take. We tend to drive them somewhat automatically. However, if there is a dislocation in those routes, a tree or accident blocking them, then we have to think, what now? And we're forced to take a different route. It is in this vein of trying to confuse people that ProCon.org works hard to diligently present at least two sides of controversial issues, and doing that job so well that people can find their own bias on particular issues shaken, if just for a moment, by seeing well-presented arguments on other sides of the issues. That being said, please enjoy our home and grounds, feel free to wander, and thank you for supporting ProCon.org. And I'd like to thank Steve and Yadwiga for having us all and hosting us in this beautiful home. So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, our very own CEO of ProCon.org. His name is Kami. And what I want to say about Kami, I just found this out this morning, he actually won Best Speaker for the past 7 years by the Junior Statesman of America, 7 years in a row. Wow. And yeah. And I'm going to tell you about Kami. He looks very soft-spoken, but the truth is he's a bulldog. when it comes to finding excellence and in his pursuit of excellence and working so diligently to make ProCon the best it can be. One of the most dedicated men you'll ever meet. Get over here, paper. He has appeared in CBS, NBC, NPR, Associated Press, Reuters, CNN, dozens of other media outlets. He has spoken at numerous conferences across the country. Formerly chief editor at the Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership, and I could go on and on. So, Kami, I'd like to invite you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilona. And honestly, folks, thanks to all of you. I mean, I don't do this on my Sundays typically. Go to somebody's house, walk past dinosaurs, to sit in their living room, look at the weird statuary and artwork, and to hear about controversial issues. This is an unusual thing for us all to be doing, myself included. And I just thank all of you for taking time out of your day to be here. Thank you for the introduction, Ilona. It was very kind of you to say all those things about me. It's true, I've been in all those media, and it's true that I'm very committed to ProCon, but I wanted to talk a little bit about awide, and I want to talk briefly. I'm not going to talk for more than 5 minutes. All of you are so interesting in your own rights. I feel like I don't deserve to be here any more than you do. So I'm really here just to tell you about ProCon. So ProCon exists because of something that we all feel viscerally in our homes, and we see in our Congress, we see in our local governments, state governments, federal governments, internationally, and it's a problem of partisanship. Partisanship is not necessarily awkward conversations with somebody. That has been happening since people have been able to communicate. But the nature of these unable to talk to one another has gotten to historic lows, historically terrible degree. At the Constitutional Convention, when our nation was being founded, someone asked Benjamin Franklin, Mr. Franklin, what type of government have you given us? And he said, a republic, if you can keep it. And the if you can keep it part seems awfully tenuous these days for different reasons. Whether you're on the left or the right, it just feels like people are disengaging from this democratic process and that we are not able to communicate with one another. We can't solve problems together. So I say it's historic lows because it feels that way, but it's honestly true. And I wanted to show you this. This is a study of party polarization. There's 2 lines, one representing the House and one representing the Senate. And it talks about the degree to which they vote the same. And you see in the 1870s where this chart began, this was immediately after the Civil War, where you would imagine, of course, we'd be very polarized. At that time, the parties tended to vote almost unanimously for their own legislation. So Democrats went across lines, Republicans went across lines. And over the course of time, into the 1920s, 30s, 40s, it was different. People were crossing party lines to vote for legislation. But notice towards the end of this chart, it starts to spike up again, and it spikes up again, and it goes past where we were during the Civil War era, which is really shocking and disappointing. So that thing that we feel like, is it really so bad? Yeah, it's really so bad. It really is so bad that we can't talk to each other. And I know we don't just see it, but to Ilona's point, it's at our Thanksgiving dinner tables where we honestly, like, you're prepping family members saying, do not say the word Obama, do not say who you voted for, I don't want to hear it, and because we don't want to ruin these family moments. But and that might seem fun or funny, but the sad reality is we have to live in this country. And so I want to just share this. So my family, we were refugees from Iran. We left during the Iran-Iraq War. And we came to this country because we thought this was the best place on earth. And it is. But we don't want that to change. We want to be able to fight for what we thought this country was supposed to represent, where people can disagree without being disagreeable, where we can be civil with one another, we can have civil discourse, civil engagement, and not always see eye to eye. We can yell and argue at each other, but then we're going to go and have a beer afterwards, right? And that's how this is supposed to work. So I say all of that for the context of what ProCon is. ProCon is designed and uniquely geared to be able to address this issue of partisanship. The bottom line of what ProCon does, and David Hughes, I think you said it so well, we are here to educate people on both sides of issues. Period. And why? Because no one else is doing it. That's the reason why. Nobody else is focused on presenting both sides of these controversial issues, and we are uniquely geared to do it. And when I say uniquely geared, it's because we have an in-house staff where content is curated in-house. This is not wiki anything. This is hard stuff. This is people with journalism backgrounds, reporters. These are people who can vet content multiple times, scrub it, clean it before it gets published. Our content goes through 7 rounds of scrubbing before it gets published. And then once it gets published, we have a large audience. How large? Last year we had 27 million readers. We have had over 140 million readers since we began. ProCon exists as a resource for students. We want future generations to be able to understand both sides of issues, weigh and consider differing opinions, not just say, oh, my dad says Obama's a bad guy, so he must be a bad guy, or my mom thinks we should have voted for Hillary, so that's what we should have done. No, question, consider, what about point and counterpoint? So ProCon, we also serve over 9,200 schools in all 50 states and 90 countries. You can click a button on our site and have the site translated into 100 different languages. As a for example, our site is used by the Israeli Knesset. We've been referenced 3 times by the Knesset. We've also been referenced by the government of the Palestinian Authority. What's especially cool is you can click a button and translate our site on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict into Hebrew and into Arabic. And I think that's awesome. And then in the schools, our most popular subjects, medical use of marijuana. 3 years ago, it was the same-sex marriage. Before that, it was the death penalty, an all-star in debate. We want to train people that if you hear this, there's counterpoint. We talk about teacher tenure, standardized testing. We talk about U.S. drone strikes overseas. Really important issues for people to understand what the heck is happening in our world, and they want to find a neutral source to do it. So that's the utilitarian aspects of ProCon. It's really a practical resource. It's free. There's no advertising. You don't have to register to use it. You just go there. Librarians are so confused when I say it's free. Yes. It's for you. It's for your students. It's for the teachers. We have sections for teachers to help them integrate it into curricula. We exist to serve the schools, we exist to serve the general public, we exist to serve the media, we exist to serve the policymakers at state legislative levels. We have been referenced now by over 40 different state governments. We've been referenced by 25 different international governments, including the United Nations and the European Union. We've been referenced by over 3,000 different media outlets now. We were listed as, and I am bragging, we were listed as a top 20 resource by the American Library Association. In the same bucket as Wikipedia and TED and Google, there's ProCon. I thought that was a tremendous honor. I think that's terrific. I know ProCon has a really terrific program. I know that the need for what we do is tremendous. I also know that our challenges are huge. Our society, our culture is not geared to train people to look and consider multiple points of view on different issues. So we have some educating to do, and we need to tell people, hey, this resource exists. Why don't you use it? Why don't you use it? Say, hey, everybody, before you come over for Thanksgiving, why don't you spend 10 minutes looking at ProCon? We have Thanksgiving guides, we really do, so that people can train themselves. So this year, we are trying to come out of our shell. For the last 12 years, the Markovs have been more than generous. They've been primarily funding ProCon, and that's great, but that's not healthy. As a nonprofit organization, we need to stand on our own 2 feet. And so that's part of the reason we're here today. In October, I became CEO of the organization, immediately thinking fundraising, immediately thinking marketing, immediately thinking keep doing this great content, keep doing outreach. The timing is so right for us right now. And so what we're doing is trying to spread the word. And so part of what I'm asking everybody who's here today, if you've heard the message about ProCon, if you think this would be appealing to other people, tell them about it. If you are connected to people in the foundation world, tell them about ProCon. If you know people who say, boy, I think ProCon, you should do a website about marijuana legalization, or I think you should do a website about does God exist, or I don't know, whatever the issue is, we will consider doing a site about that, and if they want to help fund it, great. We're looking for more issues, we're looking for more reach into foundations, we're looking to get to more schools, we're looking to spread the word about ProCon as far and wide as we possibly can. So to that end, you'll see later this year we're having 4 events over at USC. We have 4 events at the very western edge of the Santa Monica Pier. These are public events, please come down. We're going to be moderated debates on various public issues. We're going to be at the Junior Statesman Leadership Symposium in Sacramento. We're going to be at the Junior Statesman event here in Los Angeles at the Gene Bird Institute. We're going to be doing more and more topics. We do a topic a week on our through our Google Newsfeed. We're a Google News provider, and on and on and on. ProCon is trying to spread its wings and trying to make ourselves independent. We're trying to do it now in an atmosphere where the need for what we do is so great. And to that end, I'm so excited about the folks who are in the room today, and I'll leave you with this before I hand back the mic. So I often get cynical about what's happening in politics, and it's easy to do that given the world that we live in now. But when I think about it, at the end of the day, what Steve Markle was talking about, this critical thinking that seems to be lacking, this critical thinking idea is one that is being embraced more and more at an educational level. So the National Math and Science Initiative, which is responsible for training all the math teachers and science teachers in the country, they have now put critical thinking into the core bit of their curricula they're spreading out. So who else? National Council for Teachers of English, same thing. National Council for the Social Studies, same thing. There's a real push now towards doing this. I think we can right the ship. I think we can get back on course and I don't want to use make America great again, but get us where we're thinking critically again, and are able to put that spark back in the U.S. economy. This is an engine that has driven our growth for the last couple of hundred years. We are a nation of innovators. We're a nation that depends on a dynamism and a critical thinking nature from the people that live here, and that's not going to happen if we disengage from our government, if we don't talk to one another about issues, and if we ignore people who have different points of view. We have to engage. It's imperative for the development of our democracy. And so Benjamin Franklin has said, if you can keep it, well, we're doing our part. We're going to try to keep it. So thank you folks so much for coming today.
Thank you for bringing up so many great points about all the great programs that ProCon does. The next speaker that I want to introduce is someone very special, very dear to my heart. And he is a true force of nature in the media world. It's Mr. David Suissa. Some of you may know him. He's the president of the Jewish Journal. And David used to own, was the founder and CEO of Suissa Miller, which was once voted the advertising company of the year by USA Today. Wow. So David, what I love about having David speak is that he knows about the media. How appropriate it is to have somebody in the media come and speak with us today. But also he understands this idea of presenting both sides of the issue, and it's something that he deals with on a daily basis. So David, thank you so much for coming. I'd like to invite you.
Ilona? First of all, does God exist? I want to see that website.
I know. Yes.
Follow up on that. I'm going to share one word with you that I'd like you to take away from what I speak, from my talk today. But before I give you the word, I'll tell you a little story. I've been writing a weekly column at the Jewish Journal for almost 11 years. Haven't missed a week.
Wow.
And my reputation is I'm on the conservative side. So once in a while, I'll do a column that just goes against type. So I'm very pro-Israel. So I'll write columns that are really critical of Israel. And about a couple weeks ago, I really wrote an anti-Trump column. And you know, I'd done one before, calling him worse than a liar, and then a couple weeks ago I connected him, you know, to reality TV, and this is what happens when you spend 14 years manufacturing drama and chaos, and you get addicted to that and so forth. So some of my friends on the right just came after me. But the reason I bring it up is because of this expression that they use. And they said, Suissa's gone to the dark side. They don't say, you know, David, you know, there's some other points you should consider, blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure I agree with you, and there's other point, blah, blah, but it's not, Suissa's gone to the dark side. So when I write a column that criticizes Israel, Suissa's gone to the dark side. Now you would think that this, you know, idea of the dark side is something that's just reserved for extremists. It turns out that it's not the case. So I work for a paper that's known as to be a very liberal paper. 80% of our readers are Democrats, very liberal, classic Jewish liberals. And if you pick an issue, for example, pro-choice, for many of the people I work with, there is no other side. So I'm talking here about not an extremist, I'm talking about an average journalist, a liberal journalist. And I've been working with them every day for many, many years. And I'm not saying this to criticize, but I'm saying this to put a reality in front of us. That we think that this idea of there's no other side is a minority. It's becoming more and more and more of a majority. That's why when I was invited to speak today, and when I first heard about this cause, I was very skeptical. Because it's virtually impossible to find one of these things that doesn't have a bias. Virtually impossible. And I say this as someone who lives for that ideal. And I say this as someone who's dear friends with great journalists who will admit to me that they're not fully objective. Who will look at me and say, there is no other side to this issue. There is no other side to pro-choice. There is no other side to gay marriage. These are people that I respect and admire who tell me that there is no other side to gay marriage, right? So, again, I'm not saying this to criticize. I'm saying this to put up a mirror and to show how I was skeptical. So I actually did my homework. And I started with the big ones, right? Pro-choice, and I started, and then I went on to gay marriage, and I said, oh my God. So obviously you had 13 great points for pro-choice, and then you had 14. 14 points on what people who are pro-life say about abortion. You can't find that anywhere. There is no website that I will ever find that's got both of those columns. And same thing for gay marriage. So this is why my skepticism started. It got to a point where I was a little bit embarrassed that I didn't know that, because it's something we need to absorb at the Jewish Journal. So you would think now that it's a good thing to have both sides. What happens when you see both sides? What we've seen happen is that people just pick one. So the fact that they'll see the other side doesn't necessarily mean they'll incorporate both. It's so much more comfortable to pick a side, because politics has become like food, consumption. It makes you feel good. If you watch Fox, right, and you're a conservative who puts on Fox News, you're guaranteed to feel good. It's Doritos. You know exactly what you're going to get. It tastes good. It's comfort food. And if you're on the liberal side, you watch Rachel Maddow, and it's food. It tastes good. You know exactly what you're going to get. Same thing with Oliver and all the talk shows and Noah and all that. You know what you're going to get. And that feels good, and we can't underestimate the power of feeling good. And it feels good to feel good, and news has become a commodity that makes you feel good. In the Jewish world, it goes even deeper than that, because for us, everything's life or death. My friend Yossi Klein Halevi thinks it goes back to Sinai, because our first contact with God was revelation. He just revealed to us the truth and the 10 Commandments. So every Jew that speaks about a truth, it's like he's creating a revelation, like he's coming down from the mountaintop with tablets. And that's how Jews argue. And it gets really stressful, because I'm right in the middle of it, and I see it from both sides, and everybody owns the truth. So, and when you have these kind of disagreements, they don't become disagreements anymore. So it's not that I disagree with your view on climate change or gay marriage or pro-choice. It's that I'm rejecting you as a person. I'm rejecting you. I have a really beautiful Friday night Shabbat table. It's like the special moment of our week. And for years and years, and I have all kinds of people on Friday night. By the way, you're all invited. Yay! Jews, non-Jews. One of my closest friends is a Muslim professor at UCLA. I adore him. And conversation is absolutely reverential and critical. And it took me years to figure that out. That if I don't manage the conversation, because Friday night is a place for being uplifted. And really, we have a Thanksgiving dinner every Friday night. And I can't tell you how many times you'll see somebody come to the table and say, that is disgusting what Obama did. Disgusting. You see that? Trump is just disgusting because people don't have a filter. So I actually go out of my way to avoid politics because, like you said, people just do not know how to talk about politics. It's life or death, and I don't disagree with you. I reject you. How dare you? You have no right to have that view. And that's when you know you're entering really dangerous territory. So I promised you one word, and I'm going to share it with you, but I'm still not ready to give it to you. Because we're going through a stage now with the Jewish Journal where we're trying to figure out where we want to go editorially. And so traditionally, you know, this is the model. So you got Dennis Prager, and we have Marty Kaplan. And by the way, there is no paper in America that has that range. And you can ask Joe. You know, as much as you try to have range at the LA Times, I don't think you can go further right, much further right than Dennis Prager, and I don't think you can go further left than Marty Kaplan. And they're there side by side. It's a classic case of pro and con. And I can tell you, the letters I get on Prager, it's just, Squeeze, I hate you. Like, why do you have him there? You have to get rid of him. So these are the kind of things, and I get him on both sides. Now we're looking for a new direction, which is to look for writers who actually have pro and con inside of them. There are a few of them. Yossi Klein-Halevi, who wrote for the LA Times, is a dear friend. He's one of them. There are very few, very few. There's Gil Troy, who has it for Israel. I'm sure David could know a few. They're few and far between. I aspire to become like that. You know, that's sort of my personal goal, is to be someone who can see both sides and without being wishy-washy or mushy or just, you know, not having a point of view, still can have a soul and a strong point of view that incorporates both. And this is where we think the future is going in terms of bringing the country together. It's not so much to say, you like this point, this is your world, and then you like this and this world, and now we've just given you both columns. I think the ultimate achievement of ProCon is if people are able to incorporate both. Still have a point of view, but still incorporate both. Something happens to you. I'm really, really pro-Israel, but I can't tell you how much I read of stuff that I disagree with. I go out of my way. I have friends, I've been in refugee camps in the Palestinian territories. I have dear friends. David's father was a dear friend who was way to the left of me. I genuinely have spent hundreds of hours listening to people who I disagree with. And what it does to me is it just tempers me. So when I write a pro-Israel column, I am tempered. I don't do exclamation points. I'm tempered, and I like myself a lot better when I'm tempered. And if it wasn't for my dear friends on the left, I'd spin out of control. So I need them, and I crave them. And that's where we hope the world of conversation, discourse, and editorializing will go. So I will promise you the word, and I'll give it to you now. And I'll start with human attributes. And what are the great human attributes that we hear about? What are the big glamorous ones? Well, generosity, integrity, compassion.
Yes.
These are the glamorous. Whenever you talk about a hero, he's generous, he's compassionate, he had integrity, he was honest. My favorite has nothing to do with any of those. My favorite is that little character trait that's at the end of the Thanksgiving table that no one ever talks about or mentions, and it's curiosity.
Amen.
It's the most underrated character trait for me. It's not glamorous. It doesn't have the sexiness of generosity and compassion and integrity. But I got to tell you, it's my lifesaver. It's my dearest friend, is curiosity. But 3 weeks ago, I was rushing to a meeting on Pico Boulevard, and I saw a homeless woman. But she wasn't like on a step or anything. She was just right in the middle. of the sidewalk. And it was a bright, sunny, beautiful California day. And it just made me a little uncomfortable to just rush. But I did rush because I was late to my meeting. And then as soon as I got to the cafe, I said to my friend David, I said, I just saw a homeless woman. And I have 4 daughters. So for some reason, what popped out of my head was she must have been a cute little girl one day with like ponytails and with parents, right? So I just said that and we had our meeting. And she was sleeping at the time when I first saw her. So after my meeting, it's an hour later, and now she's sitting up, and her eyes, and she's squinting at the sun. And I'm going to my car, I'm late, I have to go to the office, and my mind is telling me just go to the office, and my heart is telling me, I'm curious, who is this woman? What is she doing right in the middle of the sidewalk? So I'm like fighting, and really, to be honest, I'm very uncomfortable talking to homeless people because it just makes me really, really uncomfortable. And although I love finding stories for the Jewish Journal, there are plenty of great stories without having to feel that this acute awkwardness of speaking to a homeless person. So I just pulled out some money as my mind and my heart were arguing with each other, and I gave her some money, and then she looked at me in the eyes and said, "Oh, thank you." And something happened when she looked at me in the eyes. I saw her humanity, and she lit up my curiosity, Gene. And then I was just compelled to sit down and talk to her. Compelled. And it changed my life. For the past. Beautiful.
Wow.
We took her at 8. I've been seeing her almost every night. Her name is Natalie Levine. Literally, the past 3 weeks of my life have been consumed with saving this woman's life. She's in a motel now in Santa Monica. And it's a long, long story. You can read it in the Jewish Journal. I won't get into it. The point I'm bringing here is that my curiosity was lit up. More than my compassion, more than my generosity, more than my integrity, my curiosity. Who is this woman just sleeping right in the middle of the sidewalk? If it wasn't for my curiosity, I would not have sat down. So I promised you the word. That's the word. This organization, it's so good that I'm embarrassed that I didn't know about it until Ilona, my dear friend, brought it up. That's how good it is. I'm going to introduce it into the Jewish Journal. And I'll tell you another reason why it's so amazing, because it's not geared for fundraising. This is not how you raise a lot of money. You raise a lot of money by picking one side or the other. And 99% of every event that I go to has one side or the other. You're resisting, you're on this side or you're on that side, and that's how you build passion, and that's how you build intensity, and that's how you build a sense of crisis and a sense of urgency to help a cause. These are the toughest causes to raise money for, because there's no drama. There's no built-in drama in seeing both sides. So that's another reason why I wanted to come today, precisely because of the difficulty factor. There are very few causes like this, and I hope that lots of donors are going to rally to this cause, because it's not the obvious causes, but I think precisely because it's not an obvious cause, I think it's one of the most important ones. Thank you.
I'm so glad you brought up Natalie, because I was going to mention that as well. Just one example of how being a man of action and not just of words is so important. And speaking about men of action, I'm so excited. Our next speaker, who many of you know, and the reason why most of you are here today, many of you, is Mike Gatto. And I've won 8 elections to represent Burbank, LA, and Glendale. 8 elections. That is no small feat. Tell me your name. What's your name?
Adrian.
Adrian. Look at the shirt Adrian's wearing. Shows you. Yay! Before I want to say how grateful we are at ProCon to have Mike Gatto. He does what he says he's going to do. He doesn't just talk. He's a man of action, and we are so grateful. And I want to publicly acknowledge all that you've done for ProCon.org. We're so appreciative. So thank you.
So I saw a lot of you laughing when David was talking about
how Jewish folks argue. I was not laughing because I know how Italian folks argue. I feel your pain. So I'm going to start off with a story that I really debated whether or not to tell because it has to do with this event. When I sent out the invitations, I got an email back from a guy who was a friend of mine, or I thought he was a friend of mine, and he's a journalist. And he said, wow, what a great concept! I really, really want to get involved with this event, right in this organization. And I said, great. I said, wonderful. Here's where you can find some more information. Here's who you can talk to. We're having a salon. Please feel free to get involved. Then it must have been just a few hours later. He called me back and he said, I looked at the website, and I gotta say, your post about I don't even remember the issue. I think it was oil drilling or something. Your post about oil drilling is full of crap. I said, well, how could it be full of crap? I mean, it's got the pro and the con. He said, well, and again, I don't remember if it was the pro or the con. He said, well, that side, the one side is just not strong enough, and it doesn't have enough, stuff, and blah 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 blah. And I said, well, how could you say this? And I read it. There's 15 points on each side. They're documented. They're cited to authorities, and he started yelling. I mean, he really went into it, and he said that this position on this one issue was not strong enough. And finally, I stopped him and I said, Justin, you are telling me that a organization that is nonpartisan and prides itself in being unbiased is not partisan and biased. And I think that shut him up for a minute. But folks, I mean, this is what's wrong with our society today. That story, which is 100% true, and which caused a lot of headache for the ProCon staff, because they started going at it with the ProCon staff as well, is what is wrong with our society today. There are people out there who really can't see, I don't think, they can't see the value in having multiple points of view. I ended up telling him, I said, you're totally missing the point of ProCon. The point of ProCon is not to tell people how to think. It's not to tell people that however you feel about oil drilling, that you're right or wrong. ProCon is about giving people the tools to make the decisions themselves. And that is something that is very, very important to me, something that's hopefully very, very important to all of you. How many of you think we live in a post-fact world? Right? I mean, it's really depressing when you think about it. I know everybody out there, I saw you nodding when Connie was talking. We've had those conversations in the last couple of years where people just are so extreme and you just can't seem to get anywhere with them and you can't seem to find good information. I'll tell you that I was in office for 7 years, and I received, the Speaker's office actually tracks this for every member in office, and I received 58,790 emails every year. And it was the most in any state in California. I had a very activist district, a very engaged, intelligent district. And I'll tell you that I answered everyone. Sometimes we get 500 emails on one topic and we'd like the same reply, but we made a point of trying to engage people and actually answer every single one of them. And I'll tell you that it's always easier to not argue with kooks. It's always easier to have a discussion with someone who's well informed. I don't know if you've ever had a discussion with somebody who's not well informed, but it's really, really difficult because there's almost nothing you can say in that case to make that person understand your viewpoint. And so that's when I had this real sea change in my life, and that's where I had known about ProCon, but that's where I told myself that no matter what, I'm going to get more involved. I'm going to make sure that I cite them in my floor speeches, that I research, that I go to ProCon when I'm researching a bill, that I get involved in the organization maybe when I leave office, because I think that value of creating a more informed electorate is something that really just profoundly betters society. It really is something that it's not just about the Thanksgiving conversations, it's really about, as other speakers have noted, whether or not our republic stands or fails. Look, I wouldn't be a politician if I didn't make a plea for funds. And, so So I'm going to tell you hopefully how this goes. So first of all, ProCon's mission. You heard a little bit about this, and I want to really stress it to you. ProCon has been around for about 15 years. How many of you heard about ProCon before you got the email? Okay, so like 4 people, right? So our mission is simple. The world has gotten way more online. In the time that ProCon has existed, we've seen the rise of 2 websites. Everybody, who in the room has heard of Snopes? Right. Okay. So you know that when someone says an urban legend that somebody got murdered when they called a babysitter on the telephone or whatever the urban legend is, you can go on Snopes, you can type it in, and you know you can find out the truth. How many people have heard of PolitiFact? Most people? Right, so people know that PolitiFact, there's a lot of journalists, and they will use this website to determine whether or not a politician's statement is true or false. Well, ProCon is really those organizations for issues. It is a place where you can go and you can find cited, documented, very well-researched things on both sides of issues. And so if you're ever in a debate, you can say, hey, I recognize your point, I think it's a valid one, let's go to ProCon. Your point is there, but hey, consider this point, and you can go on the other side. And our mission, our goal, and hopefully everybody in this room shares this, is to make ProCon a household name. Because it's really depressing to me that everybody's heard of Snopes, everybody's heard of PolitiFact, but ProCon, even though it has more hits every year than Time Magazine, more hits than Sports Illustrated, counting the swimsuit issue, but yet it is still not a household name, and that's something that we want to change. And folks, that's going to take outreach, that's going to take education, and it's going to take all of you becoming proselytizers. So I'm going to tell you a little anecdote, and then I'll make my plea. So first of all, there was a man, and he was driving around Costco on a Sunday, and he was desperately looking for a parking spot. And we've all been there. I don't shop at Costco, but most people I'm sure have been there. You're driving around on a Sunday and you're looking for a parking spot. And this guy could not find him. And so he pulled over and he started to pray. And he said, God, if you help me find a parking spot, I will go to church every Sunday. I will go pray every single day. I will go home right now and I will say 7 Hail Marys. I will be good to everybody in my life. I will do everything that you want, God. And right at that moment, like magic, a parking spot opened up. And he said, never mind, God, found one. Don't be that person. Don't be that person. A lot of us always say, well, it would be so good if the world was less partisan. It would be so good if there was a source of unbiased information out there. If I ever encountered an organization like that, I would support it. I would contribute to it. I would volunteer. I would do everything I could. But people don't always support organizations like that in reality. So we have a task before us. The task before us is to make sure that our society becomes a better place, a place where people can have better dialogue. An organization like ProCon is essential to that task. To get more well-known, it's going to take a lot of resources. It's going to take us to continue to provide really good content. It's going to take us it's going to take money to go out there and tell people about this wonderful organization and advertise. So we need to raise some money here today. You guys all knew that it was free to get in. You didn't know that it would cost you to get out. So I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but we need to raise. I have an amount in my head about how much I want to raise. I hope we can hit it today. And I'm going to start by asking, I need one person in this room. I need just one person in this room to commit to giving ProCon $5,000. All right, we got it.
All in.
Now, I need one person in this room to commit to giving $1,000. Got one? Okay, good. Perfect. Anybody else? Anybody else? All right, well, you two very, very much appreciate it. Okay, $500. 5 people, $500? 5 people, $500. Do we have one person at $500? All right, I'll be there. All right, 2. 3. Awesome. Every 500. That's 4. Who's the best? Who wants to? Oh, all right, 11. All right, good. Okay, great. All right. Oh, 6 people. Great. All right. How about $100? Well, actually, I skipped $250. I was getting too good. Who wants to do $250? How many people want to do $250? All right. One. Great. Yeah, he knows I'm going to. People know I'm going to 100 laps. All right. All right. How about $100? How many people want to do $100? All right. Great. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Terrific. Awesome. $50. $50. Who will commit to $50? One. Come on, someone else with bucks. 2. Okay, great. 3. Terrific. Thank you, everybody. I think that adds up to roughly $10,000. I'm a Democrat. I can't do math. So thank you very much. We really, really appreciate this, and we hope you will stay engaged. You will tell a friend. You will get on the mailing list. You will come to events like this, and that you will continue to give a little bit for this wonderful, wonderful thing that ProCon provides for our society. Thank you so much.
Can people donate on the website, or it's just
Yes,
stay?
people
Yeah.
can, yes, thank you. Mike, no comment on Yes.
Folks, there was a lot of people on our host committee today. There was a lot of politicians involved. I just want to recognize that Assemblyman Richard Bloom, Assemblyman Al Muratsuchi, Congressman Ben Sherman, Howard and Karen Baldwin, and of course Mike Gatto. We're all on our honorary host committee. We have from one of the the Assembly offices, a special gift and presentation, and if it's okay, Ilona,
Yes.
it's a great surprise, so I just want to make sure we get an opportunity to see this.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Scott Abrams, District Director for Congressman Brad Sherman. He's proud to be on the honorary host committee of this event and sends his regards from Washington, D.C. today, with the land of alternative facts. But it wasn't always that way. He's told me of an era where someone like Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan would come up with a quote that's, that I think a lot of us know here, which is, you're entitled to your own opinions, but not to your own facts. And that used to be how Washington, D.C. was run, Sacramento, L.A., but it seems like the other side dominates. And that's why it's so important that ProCon is doing what it's doing. You can go there, read on both sides of pro-choice, pro-life, Obamacare, Trump care. Is golf a sport? But if you're someone like myself, a political junkie, and you see the negative dialogue that's happening, and you pay close attention to elections, if you're someone like Mike Gatto who really understands the facts of different sides of the issues, the most exciting day on the calendar year for a pre-election period is when the Secretary of State sends that thick booklet of all the arguments on both sides, the legislative analyst opinion, the rebuttals to those opinions. That's when you really can see, should we support Measure BB, H2? How can you even understand it if you're just relying on the glossy flyers? But that's just for elections. What about for the daily issue? What about the constantly evolving news? Well, ProCon is that website. And this is a site that Brad Sherman's been aware of for a long time through his friendship with Steve Markoff. He was told about it from the very beginning, was excited about it, and continues to monitor its progress and growth. And so we just wanted to recognize that today. So on behalf of Congressman Brad Sherman, one of the special things he can do for an organization that is really strengthening our democracy, which is what ProCon.org is doing, is to request one of the flags that's been flown over the Capitol in Washington, D.C. And today he sent me here with this flag flown over the Capitol on behalf And this is a certificate just to prove that it was indeed flown over the Capitol. ProCon.org. Again, congratulations.
What an honor it is to be surrounded by such a high caliber of people, from our speakers to the attendees. And as a thank you, we have gift bags on your way out. We hope that you'll take the gift bags. And if you want to make a donation, we accept donations online or by check, or we have some extra envelopes at the front. So if Jeannie didn't get to you, I know she's fast, but if she didn't get to you, then please know that we have them there. And again, I want to thank the Markoffs, and I want to thank all of you for joining us.